and keeping that in mind has been really valuable for me. To add some more details, I really wanted to start a business in Vermont. That's been a goal of mine for quite a while. I wanted to do something tech-based and cool every day. I wanted to combine creative work and technology work, and I wanted to help provide some tech and creative jobs in Vermont. So those were some of my goals when I started out with this. These are another game developer, indie developer friend of mine's goals. This is Jenna, who runs a company called Little Worlds Interactive down in Boston. She's an award-winning educational games designer. Has anyone played Counting Kingdom? It is a kick-ass math game. She's given awesome talks at a whole bunch of events. She was talking at GDC this year about, one of her talks is called Enough Chocolate-Covered Broccoli, which I think really summarizes what educational games could be and should be and what they aren't today. So her goal is to make something meaningful. That's the most clean, crisp goal that she has. Educational games that are actually legitimately fun, enough money to make games independently and live comfortably. That's such an important goal to be aware of, right, and acknowledge. Comfortable enough financially to start a family. Let's not deny that these goals exist and are really valuable and important to acknowledge. She wants to raise her studio's profile and her own profile in the industry, and she wants to find a good work-life balance. All important goals, all really valuable to recognize. This is another friend of mine, Robin's goals. Robin was the lead producer on Journey, and she now has a company called Funamena. I can't pronounce her company's name. She wants to make games that have a positive impact on the world. She wants to work in games that can be sustainable, culturally enriching, and personally rewarding. She wanted to build a creatively fulfilling, sustainable, and successful culture, create a safe space for diverse perspectives. She wants all of her employees in her company and herself to have financial success, healthy lifestyles, and community involvement, and lead by example from within. I think those last two are really important because Robin has been in the industry for a damn long time. Before she was the lead producer on Journey and with that game company, she was a head producer at EA for a lot of their titles. And for someone who's been in the industry such a long time, to call out that last item, right, financial success, healthy lifestyle, and community involvement as key to her company really shows how other companies she's worked with may have not emphasized those things, and one of the reasons she started her own is because she really wanted that to be key. So, I'm going to walk through a goal with you guys today. This sample goal is to make an awesome indie game. How many people in this room have that goal? Yay! Hopefully this will be valuable. Alright, so it takes two things to make an awesome indie game, right? It takes you and it takes time. That's as basic as it gets. That's pretty much it. If you think of any indie game you've loved, it's pretty much what? Just taken some people and it's taken some time. That also means that it takes money. And I think this is something that there's this fear around acknowledging this in the indie community. I feel people don't really want to talk about money. They're like, oh yeah, well, we did it, we made the game, it happened. But I think that's kind of destructive. This stuff takes money. Your life takes money. Your time is worth money. You need to pay food and rent. You need to have personal security. You can have families, and that's valuable. You need to have your own time, let alone software, tools, and anything else that it takes to make a game. So I think it's really worth acknowledging that this does take money. To have you and your time take some money, and that's a hurdle that is primary to getting independent development done. So where does this money come from in order to let you have you and time? Well, there's 4 different sources that I've identified. And, this is my experience. I'm happy to talk this out. If anyone has any feedback or ideas, add it in. The first one is you, right? Your savings or another job. That's a great source of money, right? So for developing a business, right, that startup thing, this isn't necessarily a great way to provide money. You just funding something isn't a great way to start a business plan. But for just that individual product, right, for just getting that indie title out there, yeah, this totally works. It's worked for a ton of people really well, so it's a really valid option. Then there's the big money. So the big money is what I'm categorizing as venture capitalists, publishers, things like the Indie Fund, and Jeff, I'm going to say grants as well. Call it this is big money. It's all in there. So the big money is a valid way to fund a business, and it's a valid way to fund an individual product. Different big money will have different standards on what they want to work with, right? Venture capitalists are going to want to fund businesses. The Indie Fund is going to want to fund indie products. But that's definitely a source. Then there's the little money. The little money are things like Kickstarter, Indiegogo, and crowdfunding campaigns. This is also a totally valid way to fund both a business and an individual product. There's a ton of great, successful indie game companies that have been started with little money, and there's also a whole ton of really awesome indie game, just straight up titles that have been funded with a little money. And then finally, there's the business model. Excuse me, the sickness. So the business model is where you have a business that provides for your independent development within its framework. For example, contract development or other services. This is a great way to develop a business, which kind of goes in the title, but it's definitely not the best way to simply build an independent product. So there's pros and cons to all of these. Something that I think is really important to call out when we're talking about all of this stuff, this is a great quote. I know I've said this one to Jeff before. So this is the CEO of Supercell. Who knows Supercell? Who knows Clash of Clans? Okay, Supercell is Clash of Clans. So the CEO of Clash of Clans, which banks $10 million per day and sold their company for $5 billion, I think, he says, whoever says, I always knew beforehand this game was going to be a hit is lying. He says that, he's lying. Anyone who says that is lying, because this industry is so insanely unpredictable and random that you can have no sense of how well your game will do in the market. It is unpredictable, and that's a huge factor to consider when you get into this and you start to make choices about the goals you're going to set and how you're going to structure your life around designing one of these products. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to break down all the different forms of money that support you and your time and what they take in terms of prep times. That's how much time has to go into getting this money, how much freedom it's going to allow you as a designer and a thinker, and how likely it is that you're actually going to be able to get the money when you need it. So starting with the small money, which again is like the crowdfunding campaigns, takes a lot of time to put together a good crowdfunding campaign. Most, think of any, what's an example of someone funding a Kickstarter for a game lately? Anyone got an idea?
Star Citizen?
Right. Hyperlight Drifter, I think was the last one I did. Dear God.
Star Mazer?
Star Mazer. I was trying to think of that.
So think about the amount of quality and work that went into that campaign in order for you to be like, yeah, that looks like a damn good game. I'm going to put down some money. It's a lot. Like a lot of times, all of the pre-production work has already been done. So it takes a ton of time and a ton of energy and a ton of effort in that prep time in order to be able to successfully achieve the small money. Freedom. So you have almost 100% freedom when you fund your title with small money, but it's not 100% because you did take money from people, and that means they have some invested interest in your product, right? If you put it out there and you say, all right, yeah, this is going to be on Steam first, and that's going to make the most sense, and then 6 months down the road, that's not an option anymore, and all the people who funded your game are like, why isn't it on Steam? You're like, oh, crap, like, you just can't roll with decisions as quickly and easily as you would otherwise. So while you have a lot of freedom, it's not 100%. And then finally, likelihood. We all know the percentages of crowdfunding campaigns that are successful. I think that's pretty common knowledge these days. A lot of them do great. A lot of them don't do so great. So it's really just about the quality you put into it that is likely or not, whether or not you're actually going to get money out of all this energy that you put in. And then let's look at the big money. So big money, grants, investors, big piles of money. That also takes a significant amount of prep time to get. I'm going to argue that it actually takes a little bit less prep time and effort than putting together a successful crowdfunding campaign, but it still is a lot of time and energy because you have to prove to people who are going to write you a check you're capable and this product is good. Freedom, it's much less freedom. If one person is writing you a giant check, they're going to want a lot more influence than 100 people giving you $10. So your freedom is definitely going to be cut down significantly. We worked with a publisher for our game, and it was a really good experience. They were a great publisher. We definitely had to make certain design decisions because they had given us a large chunk of cash, and that was just a component of that relationship. And the likelihood of big money shelling out for an indie game gets less and less every single year. Quotes like that from the CEO of Supercell, who is the top of the industry, are not alien to people who run venture capital companies or publishers. And what's the main role of people giving you big chunks of money? They want that money back. unless they're a charity like Indie Fund, and Indie Fund gets more and more applicants every single year. So out of all these options, this is definitely the hardest money to secure because there's a lot of competition and you can't guarantee any return on investment, which makes it tricky to secure. So that's something to consider too. Finally, second to finally, there's you. So with you, there's zero prep time. Get started right now, Go for it as soon as you get home. You don't have to waste any time, you can just go right ahead. And there is 100% freedom, because it's just you making whatever the hell you want, so you can do whatever you want. Likelihood that it's going to happen? It's as likely as you want it to happen. Nothing is going to be a limiter except for yourself, so it's kind of 100%. You can just go for it and see what happens. With the business model, prep time, it's going to take, this is, I should explain, this isn't how much time it takes to start a business, these figures. This is how much time it takes to provide for making an independent game once you already have a business, which is our model, so I can speak from a little bit of experience with this one. It's going to take a bit of time to organize your schedule in your business to be able to provide for an indie game. You're going to have 100% freedom because it's still your company, it's your team, it's your work. There's no outside funding that's going to be able to influence your product. And the likelihood is pretty good, but it's not 100%. You've got clients. You've got jobs to do. You've got to be able to make the business run in order to bring in the capital. So it's still a little bit uncertain. And it's really worth pointing out that there have been really awesome, successful indie games that have been made with all of these models. A few examples. We all know great games that have come out with crowdfunding campaigns, big money. Jonathan Blow's new game is funded by the Indie Fund. A whole bunch of more recent titles that come out from known indie personas have the big money. Tons of games come out from indie developers that were just them taking the time. Antichamber was one guy for, 10 years, which is amazing, but he made it work, and now it's a great game. And business model, a lot of Cappies. You guys know Cappy? They did Super Time Force and games like that. They make business model work for producing their games. They work on one of their own titles every Friday. And I'm totally forgetting the name of the company. They did Splice. Does anyone know this company? I forget their name. But it's a really good game. And they also made business model work to fund their games. So all of these can work. It's just a matter of what you want. So what did we do over at Game Theory, previously Burnhamwood Games? So currently, we are Vermont-based, which is really exciting for us. We do contract development and we do consulting. We have sparse indie releases. Our last indie release was November of 2013, so almost a year and 6 months ago. We're working to get that more into the business model, but it hasn't been for a little while. We have good, reliable salaries for our team and comfortable lifestyles that don't stress us out and we can feel good with. And we are expanding our team, so we're able to hire more folks. So that's sort of the balance that we're at right now as a company. Our goals when we started, and what they have evolved into in many ways, we wanted to have steady and reliable business for ourselves as individuals. We want to be able to have salaries. We want to be able to have jobs. We want to be able to make fun stuff. We want products that combine logic and creative skill sets. We want to make things that are fun and different, and we want to have minimal stress in our work lives. So those are all our goals that we work with right now. So how we got to where we are right now. So we started the company 6 months before I graduated from Champlain College with a team of Champlain College students. We started the company right in the giant pack of indie is possible, let's do indie. Fez came out the day that our Kickstarter was successful. And so it was just like a crazy time, right? It was like everything was going on. And we were, of course, like, oh yeah, we can just make a game and put it out there and that'll be great. So we made our first game. We put it out on iPad. This was the summer of 2012. Nobody bought it. And what's so funny to me is I actually looked up statistics on number of apps that hit the App Store per month for the past 3 years. And the same month that we put out our game, July of 2012, was such a spike in releases that the App Store hasn't hit that amount of new apps per month until last month. it was this freak thing that we didn't even know we were in it, but everyone was thinking the exact same thing. It was like this crazy trend that was growing, and of course it makes sense given what was going on in the industry, but interesting to us. So we put out the first game, didn't sell enough to support us by nowhere near enough, so we said, okay, we're going to bring in some contract work, because if we need to have jobs in order to support ourselves to do this, we might as well be doing game development as our job. So let's make our own job with a contract company, fund the games that we want to make. We did that, and we had really low wages, which, by the way, you can get unemployment for like $1,600 a month, which I didn't know, and everyone should be very aware of. Like, that money exists, use it, like it's there for a reason, and you pay into it as, workers for a reason. I can't believe that we didn't touch any of that money. We were making like $800 a month for like 8 months. But anyways, we made it work. We worked really hard on a new game, which we felt really good about the concept. We finished the game. We're down here in the middle. We brought it to contests in Boston. We pitched it. We won the contests. We attracted a lot of interest from possible publishers because they really liked the game and what it could promise. We had 3 different interested publishers in the game. I took it to GDC to do negotiations and conversations with all of them. We ended up deciding to work with a publisher in Boston. So they decided to fund the rest of our development, and then it works like a book publisher when you publish games with someone. They take a percentage of sales in order to pay you to finish the product, and then they have an invested interest in the sales, right, because they take a cut of them. That is you can't really do that anymore. We showed another game to this publisher just for, shits, and we were like, hey, check it out, this is a new one. He's like, that's really great. When you finish it completely, give it to me, and we might put it out there. It's become much, much tougher to secure publisher dollars. It's really funny how it's getting similar and similar to book publishing, actually. Like, the next hit indie game is sort of becoming like the next great American novel in a lot of ways. But we put it out there, and everything we could have possibly wished to happen with the game happened. We were featured by Apple launch day as the best new game. We hit number 30 in all apps on the iTunes store. We got fantastic reviews from Kotaku, Polygon, Pocket Gamer. Everybody loved it. Apple featured it. Everybody was playing it. I had this crazy day where I was taking pictures of where it was above other games in the App Store feed. I was like, oh my god, it's above Plants vs. Zombies. Like, screenshot it. Which was so exciting, right? It had a price point on it as a mobile game. So within a week, the sales vanished. We had a really exciting week. It sold well. It was technically a hit. Our publisher was calling us, being like, yeah, you guys, we have a hit. Like, you just made my publishing company. Like, I'm going to be able to sign so many deals now because you have a hit game and you've really made it. And we were like, yeah, hit game, right. And then it was like, oh, it's not free. Oh, it's not designed to optimize on the App Store. Oh, okay. That's not really how this works. And it was a really hard moment for us. It was really soul-crushing in a lot of ways because we realized that the game was going to gross, if we were lucky, $50,000, right? Which, if you're one person working on a game, that could be sweet, right? That could be you for a year, depending on your personal goals. But we're 4 people trying to be employed, and that's not nearly enough for that. And so we had sort of these 2 really intense months of, realization, and our designer kind of had a mental breakdown, and I had this moment where I was at home just thinking through business models and being like, okay, and I just completely collapsed on my floor, sobbing hysterically, like, oh my god, I failed, like, this whole thing was worth nothing, it was a failure. And then I called my dad, and I was like, Dad, it sucks, everything's failing. And my dad was like, what are you talking about? And I was like, oh, we're not going to have money to pay anybody, it's all going to be for nothing. And my dad was like, if you don't have any money, then make sales. And I was like, oh, right, Dad, okay, I will. And so I did, and so we totally redesigned the business model based around this experience, right? So the experience that we had was that essentially what, the Supercell CEO said, there's no predictability in the market. We knew that we were going to have to completely change our business model if we wanted to produce competitive mobile titles. We were going to have to do freemium, we were going to have to buy users, I'm not sure if this is common knowledge, but there's this crazy thing that happens on mobile when you're selling games where Candy Crush is making $12 million a day. They're spending $11 million a day on users. They buy users. They actually buy the people who play the game, and that's how free games hit the top of the App Store. And they're spending as much money as they make buying new people to play the game because that's the only way they can maintain growth. Because there's this theory that if you buy a user, then 3 people that person knows will subsequently download the game as natural users. And so that's pretty much how mobile gaming works these days, which is a very dark world. And when I was at a conference in San Francisco like 6 months ago, I got really depressed because the whole thing was just user acquisition salespeople, which is what they're called, and it's really hardcore. But that being said, I have tons of friends who do Steam games indie and are really excited. But we changed our business model, we rebranded, we adjusted our goal setting, so we really critically looked at our experience and we said, okay, what do we really want from this? What do we really want our lives to be? And we decided that we really wanted to have good jobs and live in Vermont, that we wanted to do creative work, and we wanted to make games when we could and when it was reasonable. And so we changed the business model to fit those goals. So we really focused on our contract work and our consulting. And the way that our business is set up right now is consulting and contract work is our business. Our business is not making indie games. We make indie games as a laboratory, which we can have fun in and explore. And that means that those games have zero pressure of revenue. They can be whatever we want. If they make money, awesome. If they don't, it doesn't matter. And that's just a choice that we made based on our goals because it worked for us. It's a totally personal thing for every single person, and that's just what we found worked. And that's how we've been able to sustain and be comfortable. But, how do you thrive? It's really just active and intelligent goal setting, right? Thriving is all about what's valuable to you. And you're not going to be able to achieve what's valuable to you unless you really critically think about what you want out of your time and out of your life, which sounds really major, but this is going to be a lot of energy you put into something. So, take the time to really think about what you want and how it's going to work for you. And rotate your decision-making around good, solid goals that are intelligent, right? Thought through, really considered, and active, so you do this consistently. 6 months later, ask yourself again, what do I really want out of this? Is this working? How am I feeling? How should I adjust? I think it's really valuable to take that time. You can start really simple. I want to be happy with my life. That might seem silly, but I think that that's a goal that a lot of people don't really consciously consider as part of their day-to-day. And I think it's something that I've really learned is valuable to just be aware of, to take a moment in my day and step back and be like, am I really happy? Yeah, I am. Okay, that's great. How is that working out? I think it's valuable to emphasize considering stuff like this when you start thinking about business and how you move forward. A couple more things. Make lists, right? Make good lists of goals. Make good lists of things you want to do. Lists are awesome. We do it a lot. Observe, consider, and correlate, right? So really critically look at what's happening around you. Consider all of the different opportunities and possibilities. Correlate those things and draw conclusions. Really important. Reflect on your past experiences. Compare and iterate, right? Game design is iteration at its most. You start with something, you see how it works, you build on it, and you evolve it. Your life with games should be as iterative as games are. Just constantly look at it critically, see where it's at, evolve it, and move it forward. And be honest, right? I think that there's a lot of shrouds around indie game development that really romanticize it and make it seem like starving artists are the ideal that we should all be striving for. And you know what? A lot of those people are really depressed. Look at where Phil Fish is these days. For real, he's so bummed out. He will never touch games again. And I think that really sucks. And I think that if people were really honest about their experiences and talked to each other sincerely about what they were going through and what they were feeling and worked together from that level, that, we could all be a lot happier and we could all just make better decisions and set better goals. And really just go for it. I know that this talk can come down as kind of a bummer, and I'm sorry if that's the case, but really it's if you want to try something and you can, try something, because you're always going to look back and wonder what happened if you didn't. And so the most important thing is that you can look back and say, guess what? I went for it. I would be so bummed if I hadn't taken that chance, if I hadn't just said, you know what, let's see what happens if we take this leap and just go for it and try. because trying is really what it's all about, and you're always going to have that, and that's really valuable. So yeah, I think that's it. Thank you guys.
So we got plenty of time for questions from Marguerite.
Yeah.
Thank you for the talk. That was for me it was very resonant.
Okay.
Definitely.
Glad.
No, it's really good.
Hopefully
I think
not too much.
so I have one question for you to start
Yeah.
off. You know, talk about the consulting, and you know, we are also doing game development, and I'm also involved in consulting. And when talking with Kyle Clark at Design Book, you know, he talked about his experience of, you know, they went this consulting route, and they spent 6 years consulting and not working on what they wanted to work on because they, you know, they needed to pay the rent, everyone needed to make money, and he felt it really could divert you. My fear too, you know, like I want to do this game, but...
No, it's 100% true, and I think it still comes down to good goals, right? Like, if your goal is to make something unique, that's first and foremost, right? That's what you want to do, that's what you're going to do, you know? For me, I really love problem solving. You know, one of my goals was never to design a cool game. I really like games. I really like business. You know, I just wanted to do something cool in Vermont, and I really like unique problems. So for me, consulting and taking game design thinking to businesses and talking with them about how they can apply it, which is what our consulting is, that's something that I really enjoy and that I really take a lot of pleasure out of. But I think it really is about looking, you know, iterating on your goals and really considering where you're at. You know, if you finish consulting with a client because you're making ends meet and you sit down and you're like, okay, I really didn't enjoy that, did I? Right? What didn't I enjoy about that? And is it taking time away from this other thing that I enjoy more? And if this is my priority, then how can I shift things around to really make it my priority? And it's tough, you know, sometimes you have to make hard choices because obviously things take money, but I think that the best you can really do is lay stuff out consistently and really consider it and lay it against just good goal setting that you recognize in yourself.
Yeah, I think what you said, you know, what do you want to do is very important question.
Yes.
You know, do you want to make a lot of money?
Yep.
Do you want to have 1 million players or users of your software?
Yeah.
Or do you want to change the lives of a smaller group of people but have them be very loyal fans of what you're producing?
Yeah, and it's tough too because I think that sometimes people think it's a little more black and white, right? Like people say, do you want to make a lot of money or do you want to make something cool? And I think that can be a little bit ostracizing. Like I think that do you want to have a family? Do you want to be able to have a comfortable life? You know, I think that it's a lot of times it can be really ostracizing to tell people like you must do what you love because some people just you can't all the time, and that's fine, right? You can do what you're okay with doing to pursue what you care about in other ways, and that's totally valuable and valid. And not everyone's in a privileged enough situation to be able to drop everything and do what they do. One of my favorite critiques of Indie Game the movie is that it was a really privileged story, you know? All those people could afford to just kind of make their games on their own time. And that's something that, like, not a lot of people can do. And I think that I really respect the people who can do that and take that moment, but it's really worth recognizing that it's not black and white like that all the time. And the best you can really do is think about how to get that stuff out of your life if it's important to you realistically. And there's ways to do it for sure, but I don't want to make it ostracizing, you know what I mean?
Questions?
Yeah. So I have to choose from my list, but I guess I'll start with, I wanted to ask you about what you were saying about, you guys worked with a publisher for the first game. You're talking about how now the industry is already different. If you're working with a publisher, they want to step in much later in the process. So they're not providing you your funds for the development process.
Yes.
So the value added at that point in the process seems to be mostly marketing. I was curious, how much value do you think right now in this moment working with a publisher?
That's a great question. I mean, my answer is going to be a little bit not as valuable because my experience hasn't been with a publisher now. My experience was with a publisher a year and a half ago. But from my experience a year and a half ago, the reason we were on iTunes and the reason we were on the front page of those journalists was because of our publisher, 100%.
Really?
We would have never gotten that attention. The game we released before Pathogen, I think, was just as good. Did anyone play Lock?
Yeah.
Oh, man! Lock was really solid, right? Like, Lock was a cool mechanic. And Pathogen was a really good mechanic, too. It was formatted for a slightly different audience, but Lock got no downloads. And that's because we had no marketing support. And Pathogen got a lot of marketing energy, and we chose that publisher because of their marketing background. They're the same publisher who worked with Limbo and who worked with, a lot of the Pokemon titles. The PR firm the publisher was a partner with the PR firm.
Do you ever think, though, that if you had attempted to do it on your own without the publisher,
Yeah.
somehow, ignoring how you would fund the development process, that the numbers would change so that $50,000, gross after would have been another number that would have made it a self-sustaining business if you didn't have to give such a big cut to the publisher?
So if we didn't, it wouldn't have made that much of a difference, honestly. It's like we probably made $80,000 before the publisher cut, so we grossed like $40,000. And if the numbers were higher, then it might have been a different situation. And a good sort of rule of thumb that we've run by now is like, if you're going to get game sales, they're either going to be huge, ginormous, holy crap, or they're going to be like, oh, not enough.
Right.
Think about the types of reports you've seen from game sales from other indies. They're either gigantic or they're like, oh, it's like kind of enough, but it's not really a lot. So with that rule of thumb, what I've heard other indie developers recommend is like, yeah, I'll give the publisher 50% because guess what? If it makes money, it's going to make money, and it's not really going to matter that much. But again, this was like a year and a half ago, so I can't really speak. It might be even more competitive with the professional gaming PR firms now for attention, because it is gaming press is cutthroat. I mean, you've seen Gamergate started because one girl got gaming press. Like, it started with a competition for gaming press because it's so cutthroat and so competitive. So it can be a little harsh, but it's a random chance industry. There's tons of people who do really great games who they sparkle and someone finds them and they shine. But you just have to recognize that there's so much random associated with that. It's not quality to a lot of extent. I know tons of awesome quality indies who don't get that attention, but random is possible. So it's not, it's just recognizing that I think is valuable.
More questions? I got another one. Oh, do you have them back here? Oh, go ahead.
There was actually
Hey, yeah.
Did I steal your chair?
No.
No? Okay.
I'm all
Just wanted
good.
to check.
Next question.
The question I had, a friend of mine told me, and I haven't really followed up on it, but there's some Vermont Fun for game developers or something. I didn't know if you had any experience with that, or if that's...
I have no experience with that personally.
It's fairly recent, and I don't know.
Launch Vermont, is that what you're thinking?
Maybe.
It could be
specific
launch
for game, or?
Specifically for indie games.
Yeah, no, I haven't heard of that personally. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist, because the Vermont government is very poor at communicating their programs and their opportunities, in my opinion. But I know people who have worked, who work in government, and I haven't heard of it. But like I said, they're crap at communicating what's available for businesses and startups. So it could exist, but I do not know.
I saw some articles about that from a couple of years ago, and it was talked about as a proposed thing.
Might have been
but
what Lars was trying to do.
I couldn't find any confirmation that it actually ever passed.
Lars Torres, who now is the head guy at Generator, tried to put together a pool of money for Vermont game developers so that they could promote themselves at events like GDC, etc., which he tried to get $50,000 from the Vermont government just to promote Vermont as a gaming place and send people to conferences and stuff like that, and it didn't happen. Yeah.
You mentioned midway through the presentation about you getting Pathogen on the iTunes store. It's kind of like number 3. It's like, oh, so fucking awesome.
Yeah.
And your publisher is like, oh, this is so good. This next big hit.
Yeah.
And then you went into like, oh, it's not properly designed for App Store. Oh, and all that kind of stuff. Can you kind of elaborate more on that?
Sure. Well, I mean, I think that Pathogen is a very well-designed iPad multiplayer experience. If you're all sitting around an iPad, I think that Pathogen is one of the most fun things you can do with your friends. That's the experience it was designed to be, so I think it's very strong in that way. It is not a well-designed iPhone experience, and iPhones make up a large percentage of the market. Our publisher told us to put it on iPhones because that would get us far more sales than any change we could make to it on iPad, which was 100% true. It did, but it's not an ideal iPhone experience. And it had a price point on it, It had a price point on it that we thought was fair, that our publisher, with all of their extreme marketing teams also predicted was fair, because it's a more strategy multiplayer experience, so we figured strategic fans are more willing to put down a certain price point for a value product based on that assumption. But nothing with a price point sells on the App Store. Just doesn't happen. My friend Jenna, who put out Counting Kingdom, which has been hailed as like, for all this gaming press as like the best educational title. It's awesome. It has niche appeal by being educational. It's something that's really strong for kids. It's something that was, Steam greenlit. Steam jumped on it, loved it, right? It's a really quality game. She probably grossed $700 on the App Store as a featured game. And that's because she released it maybe 6 months after we released Pathogen, which just shows how quickly those trends happen. She did make she made most of the money that she's made on the game, which isn't significant still, but has been enough for her to feel okay. She made most of her money on Humble Bundle through the Steam version of the app. Yeah.
I know nothing about games,
That's
but
cool.
As you're saying, nobody wants to. Everybody gets something free off the internet. Nobody wants to pay. Who do you think screwed that up?
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, the amount of time that goes into creating this stuff, and then all of a sudden somebody's like, "Oh, well, I'm going to give it away for free."
It really
is that
sucks.
giving it away for free in hopes that something else will happen?
Yes, it is, because if you're a big company and you can afford to do freemium, you have obscene profits that are unlike anything seen in gaming ever, right? Okay, so like...
Do you want to explain freemium for everybody?
Yeah, so freemium is a free game, so there's no purchase decision, right? It's free. Of course I'll download it. But it is very intelligently designed to get you to spend money during your experience, right? You play the game, you lose all 5 lives. Do you want another life? It's 3 gold bars. 3 gold bars are just a fraction of $1, and the $1 is what you spent a while ago, so how would you know? So a ton of energy goes into devising these little psychological triggers that allow you to easily spend money in the game, and I think that for good design, honestly, I don't have as much of a problem with that as a lot of game designers do. I have Farm Hero Sog on my phone. It's the same people who make Candy Crush. I spend money on it once in a while because I think they did a damn good job designing a game. And, it's not like my favorite game is Portal, so I don't feel like I'm minimized as a gamer for enjoying a mobile experience, whatever. But they bring in, Candy Crush brings in $12 million per day, which is obscene and unheard of in gaming profits. So Clash of Clans,
But
Candy
you were also
Crush,
saying they pay out.
They do pay out, because that's how they sustain their model, but they're still far more profitable than any company. Like, Supercell's sale of $5 billion is the largest company sale in gaming history, like one of the largest in internet history. So they are able to cash in huge if they can get that sweet sauce and make that investment, and that makes it still a very appealing venture capitalist proposal of high risk, high reward. So they kind of screwed it up. I think it's also a little bit of what Apple's marketing strategy tended to be, right? Like if I spend $800 on this device and I can load it up with free content, then my device is 10 times better than it was before. So I don't think Apple does anything to de-incentivize free games, and they make a ton more money off of one freemium game that brings in 10 million a day than they would off of 100 apps that are $4 at a price point and don't sell nearly as well. And it also just fits in with our cultural mindset of we can get a lot of stuff for free, right? Social media platforms, that's a pervasive thing. And it's going to be really interesting to see how it evolves. I think that the change will happen when mobile apps start doing business models like web apps, which have been more successful, which I think is inevitable because web apps will transition to mobile because of just the shift in the user behavior. But it was a bummer, whoever screwed it up, because games in probably about 2 years went from an average price point of $60 to $5, and then from $5 to $0 to 2 years later. So pretty dramatic. Yeah.
So, if I heard you right, your company started off making a game called Lock.
Yep.
And then you made Pathogen.
Yep.
And then you moved into consulting.
We were doing contract development and consulting all throughout in order to support ourselves. Even when we had the publishing dollars, that was enough for half the team to be supported, and the other half still had to do contracting work.
Okay. How did you start doing that with one game under your belt? Like, how did you sell yourself to clients?
Started with some random people finding us at PAX East and saying we want cheap labor. We said, okay, we can do some cheap labor. And most of it has been from me being able to network and present well, and just all of our work has come from networking, and it's just about, I think Vermont is a unique place. People were really excited to support us and give us work here that I don't think would have been as eager to support us otherwise. But it's really any time that I make a